Hey guys and gals, what do you know today? Today I'm going to show you how I make my leather knife handles. Now I'd previously made this wooden handle here, but I don't like the fit and form of it. Of course I didn't even get completely finished with it. So let's show you how to take this apart and how to get started on our leather. Now I've already got it loosened up just to speed up the video a little bit. But there is a little brass nut, I guess you would call it, that you have to loosen up with a screwdriver, and then you can just use your finger to get the rest of the way out. And there she fell. So it's like a little slotted castle nut kind of. And then you just pull the pommel off, and these little brass and plastic washers, and then the wood, and then I'm going to go ahead and leave these washers on there just due to the fact that everything's going to go on top of it anyway, so there's really no use in taking that off. So yeah, let's get started. With everything laid to the side and out of the way, get your scrap leather or good leather, whatever you got handy. I personally use this scrap. It's actually from a roll from Hobby Lobby. They call it a belly roll, I think. It's pretty decent leather just for little crafts like so this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to measure this piece of wood that was going to be the handle. Just kind of figure out how wide I need to make my leather squares, blocks. Alright, and it looks like it's about 3/4 of an inch by about, it looks like about 1.25 inches. So let's lay that to the side and find our pencil. Alright, so let's start here on our scrap leather. And let's just make it, to make it easier, let's go ahead and make it 1.25 inches by 1.25 inches. And this step, you don't have to be exactly precise, just due to the fact that you are going to be rounding it off anyway once you actually get it on the knife. Alright, so let's grab our cutting tool. In this case, it's just a utility knife. And again, you don't have to be completely perfect with your cuts, which is why I'm not using my ruler to guide. I'm just going roughly on the line. Now, what you need to do, go ahead and cut out a bunch of those. Stack them up beside your wood to kind of figure out how many you need. And then we'll go from there. Alright, so I got a bunch cut out. Not enough yet. Let's go ahead and show you what I'm talking about. Obviously, like I said, they do not have to be perfectly square, as you can see. Now what I'm talking about is you want it the same height as your block of wood, or your previous handle, or the handle that was on it. So continue cutting. Alright, before we move any farther, let me show you how we're going to fit the leather actually on the tang of the knife. And this is no rocket science whatsoever. Just kind of eyeball it. What I'm going to do, since I do not have a oblong punch for it, I'm just going to take the biggest hole punch that I have on my leather punch. I'm going to roughly find the center. And there we go. We have a hole, obviously. Now, that's not going to fit into it, obviously, with the first hole. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 3 holes side by side. And try to clear that a little bit. Alright, and it should look something about like that when you're done. Again, doesn't have to be perfect. It's going to be hidden in the knife anyway. Then just test fit it. That feels nice and tight. And there you go. You are on your way to having a leather wrapped knife handle. Now, I'm also going to cut out a couple of these little thin pieces of black leather. Just kind of offset the color a little bit. I'm going to have one kind of towards the front, and then I'm going to have one more towards the rear, just to give it a little bit of a different color and texture. Alright guys, as you can see, we're moving along, and just to reiterate, they do not have to be perfect. You're going to have all this different sizes, and it's going to be completely flush. We will take care of that in the sanding and grinding process once we get the fiberglass resin on there and get everything bolted up. So, let's continue working. Alright, one thing I did forget to mention, guys, is if you have a junky pair of leather punches like I do, you won't get a pretty clean hole like this. It will sometimes wind up looking like this, where some of it's not punched all the way through. Now you can take your fingers and kind of push that out, and it looks good from this side, but this side you've got those little knobs left. You cannot leave those, because once you put everything on the knife and compress it down, it's going to have a bulge there and it's going to throw everything off. So make sure you either twist those off, or a good thing to do is when you make your hole, after you hear it snap, take and just twist the leather around, and normally that will cut any fibers that's keeping it in there. And there you go, and keep on working. Alright guys, I think I got enough cut to fill up the entire handle of the knife. So let's go ahead and add to it and make sure we got it and pre-fit everything. Alright guys, so it looks like everything is going to fit good. Now this leather will compress, because once we put the fiberglass resin on it, we're going to compress it together and make sure we push all the air out of it basically. So you will lose a little distance this way. However, with the way the tang is made and that screw, you will have an adjustment, so you can tighten it down from what little it will affect it. So that's got basically the hard work done. So let's go outside to the old shop and go ahead and start fiberglassing this up.
Like a noob, I left the back door closed on the GoPro, so it sounds like I'm whispering to the camera in the next couple segments. So I'm going to do a quick voiceover of it. I'm basically explaining that the fiberglass resin is some pretty potent stuff. You want to use hand protection like rubber gloves, eye protection, and some form of respiratory mask. Um, Definitely want to do it in a ventilated area. I prefer using a fan to blow all the fumes back outside from the shop just so you're not breathing that stuff in on top of using a mask. I didn't have any rubber gloves in this one, so I just kind of made do with a pair of pliers, but you'll see. Now, here I'm explaining that I wrap the blade in masking tape and then put some plastic around that and then masking taped it up again. Now I'm explaining that I laid the towel down just to protect the bench a little bit. It's not the best case scenario to protect the bench from fiberglass, but you use what you got handy. I actually stuck some aluminum foil around it, just kind of protect the bench even more than the towel would. I'm explaining here that I'm just going to take the leather squares, dip them in the fiberglass resin, and then slide them over the shank using the needle nose and the flat screwdriver, just to kind of keep my hands out of it. The stuff's sticky. Again, it's pretty gnarly stuff, so you want to treat it with care. All right, I'm basically going to show you with a couple squares here what to do. You want to soak it in the fiberglass and get it all over it, and then slide it over the shank. Now, don't worry too much. I mean, it's good to get the excess off, but I actually mixed it a little hotter, which means you put too much activator in it, it'll set up faster, and you don't have as much time to work with. So I try to kind of speed through this. What we'll do is we'll let you look and kind of get the gist of it with the first couple squares, and then I'll try to speed up the video and just make it a little faster on you. At this point, it ain't got to be perfect. You're just trying to get all the squares on, covered in fiberglass as quick as you can, and then at the end, we'll try to squeeze it down and compress it and squeeze out any excess. But as you can see here, it's no rocket science. Now, since I did have different colored leather, I did methodically lay it out so I knew what was going on next. That way I didn't have to try to count and keep up with too much as I'm trying to work against the clock here. But let's go ahead and speed the video up and come back in a second. Putting the last one on now. What we're going to do is we're going to give it a good squeeze and try to compress all that leather down, push any excess fiberglass resin out. Then we're going to put the stock washers that came on, and then the pummel, and then we're going to have to press it down enough to have some threads for the castle nut to stick on, or the end nut, pummel nut, whatever you want to call it. Give her a good squeeze, good push. That'll give you a good end result. Everything will be compressed together good. It'll be a more solid piece. More to work with. And then just tighten it up and let it sit there and dry. Now I did use a heat gun on it. Try to speed up the process a little bit. You don't want to get it too hot. Better to let it dry naturally. But just kind of give it a little boost. I'm going to let it set overnight. And then we'll do the sanding tomorrow.
Alright guys, so after it's been drying for a little while now, actually about a day and a half, it's time to move on to the sanding. Didn't quite get as firm and hard as I wanted it to. It's still pretty rigid though. Should be enough to work with. And then what we'll do is we'll move it on over to the belt sander and then round it off to our liking. We want to get it small enough to fit the hand good, but yet comfortable at the same time. And there's no sense in you watching the sanding because it's going to be loud anyway. So we'll get it sanded, then we'll show you the end product on it before we start our fine sanding or hand sanding. So let's get started. Well guys, we got the sanding all done. We started with 40 grit on the belt sander and got down to 180 doing a hand sand on it. It's actually the finest grit that I had, so could have went a little further with it. But for what it is, it turned out alright. When I got done, I heated the handle back up and put some beeswax on it just to seal it in good. Get a pretty nice little sheen. But yeah, she turned out pretty good. The only complaint I have is I didn't do quite as well compressing everything, so the finger guard there is a little on the loose side, but no complaints. The handle will loosen on up and push it down, then we can just tighten that nut up there in the end. So no big deal, it'll take care of itself. But there she is. That is how you make a leather knife handle. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.